spending yet. Now, would I vote for a tax increase if every possible solution was met first and the only way to make ends meet would be a tax increase? I'd have to look long and hard at it, but I do not support any tax increases at all.
Thank you. Thank you.
When I first started campaigning, my whole thing was we can't have tax increases. Michigan's sitting on the edge right now. And I believe that from a short-term point of view. But I also know the reality, and the reality is there's two things we can do in Michigan. One is we can cut, or one is we can raise taxes. I'm not for raising taxes whatsoever either. We have to cut where we can cut first. We have to eliminate fraud. We have to eliminate things. We have to look at all these duplicitous agencies that are doing things so we don't have to do this. There are exemptions that need to be looked at on groups of individuals and people that aren't paying any taxes at all. What we have to do is we have to broaden the base that's paying taxes instead of having to worry about increasing them. If you're not paying any right now, I guess it would be looked at as a tax increase. But when I found out the other day that public school employees don't pay up to $80,000 worth of income, they don't pay income tax on that in the state of Michigan. And the state of Michigan is going to be in 15 to 20 years over 50% retirees. Where's your tax base? If all public school retirees don't have to pay state income tax on their pensions, but if you're private, you do. And if you only make $15,000 and go to work at Walmart, you're going to pay income tax too. So there's some discrepancies in some of the stuff, and I don't think everybody knows. What is a tax increase and what isn't? And maybe if you're not paying any right now, a tax increase, but maybe it's not fair the way the system's set up. So do I want a tax increase? No. I think the idea of the service tax thing is not a bad idea. I don't think it's far-flung, exemptions on medical business, but it's going to have to be done revenue neutral for the first year or two.
Thank you.
My answer is no on tax increases. There may be some need for changing some tax systems so that it does make it fair, but I think for the most part we just have to change our spending habits. And there was a quote by a fellow from Magnolia, I wrote it down while we were talking, hoping I would get it close to right, but it's the idea behind it is if your spending system is broken, no tax system will work. If your spending system works, change that tax system will work. We've got to start with our spending. We've got to get that straightened out. And so many people alluded to that. Our biggest expenditure in the state is human services. And I want to be able to help those that need help, but we've got to be realistic with it. And we've got to cut fraud. We've got to put some limitations on able-bodied people who are receiving endless assistance. We have to provide some incentives to work and help those people to help themselves. Those people will be happier if they actually do work. And so we have to really be creative and make that system work better. And there's so many other things we can do, but we've got to start where the biggest expenditures are, and we've got to go through every single, like Mark said, we've got to go through every item and look at the things that we can cut our expenditures and make them more efficient.
Thank you. Next.
I agree. I am not for any tax increase whatsoever. What we need to talk about is tax breaks for the small business, tax breaks for the farmer, tax breaks for those that provide a service, that hire people, that our unemployment, which is standing, depending on where you're standing in the state, some is 10%, and around here I think it's up near 15%. We have empty factories that are sitting all across the district and have been sitting empty for months, if not years. There's there's no reason for that. It was because they went somewhere else, they got a better deal, they moved south. And, so I think that we need to look at the other end of that spectrum. I would look at closing some loopholes, depending on what they are. You know, but that definitely needs to be looked at, but I'm not for raising taxes at all.
Thank you. Third question.
No, I think plenty of chance.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Well, on the back of my flyer, my quote is, "We do not need more taxes, we need less government." And I have to agree with Joel. I know it sounds cruel when we say we need to reduce some of our human services, but there are so many fraudulent cases where people are able-bodied in collecting SSI that we need to make sure that those things are happening less and less. I think that the state can control its spending by reducing some of its services and becoming smaller government. There would be less need for taxes. Now, the only way I would consider an increase in sales tax or income tax is if it was not just an increase in those taxes, but a tax shift. Because I feel property taxes are an unfair tax. If they could shift some of the burden to a sales tax instead of a property tax, I think that would be more fair for the whole population of the state. Because everyone buys merchandise, not everyone invests their money properly into an asset.
Thank you.
I agree with Mark on the sense of, I actually had a question here, but I filled that out, is that there needs to be more flexibility for the judges and handing out sentences, rather than having it in the books that it's an automatic whatever. We need to be able to look at what the circumstances were, and they need to be able to use some of their judgment. I think that's why we elect our judges, instead of having these automatic, life terms for things that may not sometimes justify it. And along with what Tim said, that's another problem that we have, and everybody knows it. They don't want, they're afraid to say it in the times that we're in. But we have a lot of nonviolent people that are in there for drug crimes that they weren't dealing, they weren't selling, they were caught with it on them. And we need to look back at that. That's a big percentage of our population. One last thing, I talked to Magistrate LeBoda the other day and asked him his opinion. And he said another thing that we have to look at is our parole system here, because we have, compared to neighboring states, one of the highest rates of keeping people on parole, or in prison rather than parole. We need to look at people. He says, if somebody's 60 years old, they've served 25 years, are they still a danger to society? Probably not. Let's let them out and, stop spending money on this type of thing. So I think that there's a three-pronged approach: sentencing, the parole system, and then also looking at what our priorities should be as far as what is breaking the law or what is not breaking the law.
Well, I think that we have to do like with this, like we do with everything else. It seems like a lot of our government people are bad prioritizers, and it's the same thing with prison. And there are probably things that we can do. I think increased use of electronic tethers for people who are not violent criminals. I think that's an important thing that we can do. And then the other thing, we've got to stop revolving doors on our prisons. We have to have a deterrent to crime out there. And as long as we're letting people out willy-nilly,